Hi everyone, my name's Greg Freeman. I'm the CEO of Data Literacy Academy, and we are joined on this video series in partnership with Andy Crossley from Oakland. And what we wanted to do was share a video series that explains how we think about the world, and hopefully it helps a lot of people. Something that we see really often on the discovery side of things is this obsession with people knowing where they are today. And I think there's definitely that element of an overarching data maturity assessment, which I think is obviously where you and the strategy piece comes in. But for us, one of the big challenges is that actually most organizations do or should know that their data literacy and their data culture isn't really there at the moment. You don't have to spend a load of money working that out. The other challenge you've got is that if you try and baseline people who you know are bad at something, and that's really unpleasant, right? So it's really like not a nice experience to be tested on something that you know you're not good at. So what I always compare it to is languages, which is one of my real barriers in life. I've taught myself that I'm never going to be able to learn French or Spanish or any of those things. If someone said to me, oh, what we want to do is we want to baseline your French and Spanish, and that's going to be really important to us as a company, but your experience of it's going to be rubbish because you're not going to do it well, I'd be like, well, I'd rather do anything but that today. Do you know what I mean? So what we've got to do is really think about in this discover phase, especially on the people side, how do we most gently and effectively find out where we are when really most people know anyway. So you don't need to spend too long on that. Don't invest too much money on that. We do need to baseline, and there are ways we can do that. But once we've got the learners and the employees to a level of comfort with why we're doing it, and I think that's something that we'll probably talk about more in the define stage, but how we get them to that point is a really important element.
Yeah, I really agree with that in terms of what we find from a technical perspective or even strategy element when you're discovering what exists or doesn't exist. It's really easy to find all the things that don't exist, but that makes people feel like you're starting at such a low baseline that we're never going to solve it. It sort of ends up in the too hard to do pile. We try to make sure that we can pick out things that you are doing well, because you can exploit those, whether that is technology or there's a team over here doing something really interesting, really cool. How do you build on that? How do you use that as a success story to the rest of the organization? So yeah, I agree. The sort of discover phase really helpful for identifying opportunities that may not exist and identifying some gaps they may not exist, but don't overdo it. You can lose yourself in that phase and never really get started, which sort of defeats the object of this.
I absolutely love that mindset, to be honest, around looking for opportunity, because as much as I started off by saying we kind of know where we are, there's not much data literacy right now, there's not much data culture, which is fairly common in large organizations. Actually, there are some real pockets of hope in a lot of places. So where you can invest a really good amount of time in kind of understanding the nature of the opportunity and the people out there is in where those pockets of opportunity exist. And like you say, starting there can be a really good, when we talk about kind of your first cohorts and discovering who your first cohort should be, you need to find a first cohort of learners, of course you do, because otherwise you'll never get started, which again is something we see as a real barrier. It's about finding those pockets of hope and opportunity, spending a lot of time and energy with those people, because they'll be your kind of proof points moving forward of what good looks like.
The other thing we found, especially in Discover, is helping people to try and think about why you're doing a gap analysis or a baseline assessment. What's the purpose to you? And often people they've not even thought of the question. So being able to bound that somehow to go, well, what are you trying to hope to get out of an assessment or a discovery or a needs analysis, really sets them up for going, well, that's the outcome we want to achieve, that then moves us into the next phase. But without that, you end up just running around finding all the gaps, finding all the problems, go, well, we already know that. It's not very helpful. So yeah, agreed.
Yeah, one of the things that we worked on with one of our large manufacturing clients actually was that they wanted to do a kind of almost a spray and pray approach to this, where they went out there for kind of inbound inquiries from the business about who wanted to be involved. And it did work really well actually, and very often it can be, you'll get a lot of appetite from certain areas, and that is a good way of discovering who are those pockets, where are those pockets. Ended up being their manufacturing and their quality team was super keen to get involved, which is great. And I think by making the discovery as easy, cheap as well, because ultimately discovery shouldn't be the bit that costs money. Making progress and change and effect and executing in the execute phase should be where you're investing and getting the ROI. So yeah, different ways of just testing the water, finding those pockets of hope and opportunity is a really sensible thing to do.